I'm Stefan, I'm a principal scientist at CSIRO, the National Science Agency, and I've been in CSIRO for just on 15 years now, and it was back in 2009 that we kicked off the work that I'm going to talk about today. I was sat down in a restaurant in Canberra by a senior colleague, and that restaurant was called Du Jour, which translates from French to English as Trend of the Day. And it was a fairly apt title for the restaurant because this is where we kicked off a project on global megatrends to start to look at what the future was going to be with a rough 20-year time frame. Megan Clark, the CEO of CSIRO at the time, really wanted something that looked further out because of the basic challenge of ensuring every dollar we had was spent on science solutions that mattered for our children and grandchildren out into the future. Science is a business that bears fruit over decadal or even century-long time frames, and for that reason, we've got to be making forward planning decisions. So to tackle this question of working out the future for the next 20 years, it was new to me, and we had a look at Shell's scenario planning method, which some of you might have heard of, but we landed on the concept of megatrends, which was developed by John Naisbitt in his publication in 1984. And a megatrend is a big shift in the environment where we are today, and it usually is sort of a 20-year time frame that it expresses itself, and it puts the world in a very different space. So the film company Eastman Kodak faced a megatrend back in the early 1970s, really, and more so in the 1980s, and that was of digitization. Kodak basically made its money from developing film, print film, and traditional cameras. Digital technology was creeping up on them, and by the late 90s they knew something was happening. In 2003 they opened up a website called Kodak Easy Share, and on this you could load up photos of family and friend after the weekend barbecue, and then someone else can jump on, and for $16.95 they can buy a copy and get a delivered printout of the photograph. They had a lot of people loading up images onto this, and they didn't really understand the resource they had, but it wasn't translating to the click and buy option. At the same time Kodak did this, a bunch of uni students in Harvard, with somewhat darker motives at the beginning of the process, came up with an alternative tool, which would later be called Facebook. And it wasn't about printing film. This new tool was about the social networks, the relationships, people's egos, and all the other sort of stuff that happened online. And it became a multi-billion-dollar company very quickly. What was happening to Kodak, though, was a megatrend, the slow boil phenomena, the concept of putting a frog in water to boil, which is unethical because we're in Queensland, let's choose a cane toad. So if we put a cane toad in water to boil, initially it feels quite comfortable and warm, the temperature rises to a point of criticality, and the toad can't escape and it will boil, whereas if it were thrown into already boiling water, it has a chance of scampering out because of the temperature shock. And that is the concept of a megatrend. What happened to Kodak, and they filed for bankruptcy in 2011, was a megatrend, and it's based on this notion of a gradual boil. So we identified 6 megatrends, and we did a crowdsourcing approach across CSIRO. We have 6,500 staff, 4,500 scientists, many world leaders in a lot of different fields. So steal an idea off one person and it's plagiarism, steal an idea off lots of people and it's research or crowdsourcing. So we researched this question of the future, and they were entering trends about directional change across all these different fields. And you might enter a trend about nanotechnology increasing in use, and then you can jump on board and add it on top of that. And from these trends, we grouped them together to create megatrends. We had a workshop in Sydney which identified 19 megatrends, and we reduced it down. And each year we're now re-releasing this report. It first came out in 2010, then 2012, and we'll be doing another release in 2015 this year. And this captures our thinking on the next set of megatrends that will impact the environment for Australia. So the first megatrend that we have here, we call more from less. And in our database sitting behind this is a bunch of trends about the increasing pressures on scarce environmental resources, and we mean food, water, energy, and mineral resources. The world population has crossed its 7 billion persons threshold and will probably level out later this century closer to 10 billion people. But it's not just more people requiring more resources, it is more people with more buying power. Incomes will rise from around $12,000 GDP per capita to $44,000 GDP per capita. We actually see 1.02 billion people across the Asia region cross the income threshold from being poor to middle income class. So an incredible shift in the buying power of the world. And that buying power is translating to demand for the underlying resources. But if we look at the supply side of the equation, the graph is heading in a different direction, in that each year we lose 12 million hectares of agricultural land in this world because of desertification, land degradation, pollution of soils, and urbanisation as well. And this is taking land out of production. Plus, as energy demand grows and energy prices rise, we're seeing an increased amount of agricultural land used for biofuel production. So instead of growing corn for food consumption, we're growing corn to put into aeroplanes and cars and power engines. So this takes more resources out of food production. And the consequence is food prices have been pretty high. If I put in front of you a graph of food prices, and I think it captures this more from less megatrend pretty well, the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization maintains this data set on global food prices, and it's a pretty good index of how much human beings pay for food. During the 1990s, it's pretty flat. 2000s, it curves up. 2008, it spikes to its highest level ever, and that was a humanitarian crisis as 150 million people were thrown into malnutrition and starvation around the world as poor households in the developing world spent 80% plus of their income on food. So when food prices spike, they can't stop buying food and can't stop buying movie tickets and buy more food. The budget is exhausted and it transmits to starvation quite quickly. So it was a humanitarian crisis. It came down as everything crashed in the great financial crisis of 2008-09, but then in 2011 it rose to even higher levels yet again. The best solution to high food prices might have been high food prices because the world's agricultural sector got on and produced. As we look out to the future, the world's got to make 70% more food by the year 2050 than it does today to account for the growing population and increasing per capita calorie consumption rates associated with income growth. It sounds really scary, but in actual fact, the data tend to show a positive story here of humanity keeping pace with this trend. In fact, each year, the number of people who are in the hungry category decreases as a portion of the total. So we are heading in the right direction. Water scarcity, mineral scarcity, energy scarcity factors into this megatrend as well, and all create huge challenges and opportunities for humanity. It's not just on the downside, this megatrend. There is a huge amount of innovation in companies and in government across the spectrum about how to make more efficient use of these resources. So there's a big business and industry opportunity in that first megatrend as well. There's 6 megatrends in total. The next one is called Going, Going, Gone. This one was inserted at the request of a lot of ecology scientists who had a look at that first one and said, yeah, that's right, we are facing a world of resource scarcity which requires innovation. But what about all the resources that are non-commodifiable, things that do not have a dollar value attached to them and are not traded in markets but are still valuable? What about the dugong, the cassowary, the sugar glider, the Great Barrier Reef? These resources hold value to us, but they're non-market. And as I look into the data, there's a valid story to tell here. So in 2008, 2 Stanford Uni ecologists published what I think was a really groundbreaking paper, which argued that the coming decades set the scene for the coming millennia for the world's biodiversity, as they accounted for all of the status of the world's biodiversity. And they found that the pressures bearing down upon our biodiversity are greater than ever before. The state is worse than it ever has been. But there is a good news story, and we end with a question mark. The team actually wanted to call this one a window of opportunity, or something that was glass half full rather than glass half empty. We've gone glass half empty because I think it captures the situation. But the question mark is about what human beings are doing. The amount of legislative effort, investment by private, public sector, philanthropic investment, all those graphs are showing lines heading in the right direction to protect the world's biodiversity. So it's a bit of a race that's on. It expresses itself heavily in the area of coral reefs. Coral reefs are an ecosystem under most pressure. Each year we lose about, I think it's 0.5% of hard coral cover of the Great Barrier Reef. That system is shrinking bit by bit. But if we were to alleviate the pressure, scientists say it could be increasing by around 2%. So it's a race against time on that going, going, gone megatrend. The Silk Highway is our trend about the changing world economy, and we live in an amazing period of history where the world economy is shifting from west to east and from north to south a little bit as well. So I have a map in my office, and it's based on algorithms by a London academic called Danny Qua, and he has determined the hotspot of global GDP. So imagine in front of me a map of the world with all the countries, and it's like a fry pan, and instead of emanating heat, it's emanating GDP. In the year 1980, the hotspot is in the Atlantic Ocean, in between the powerhouses of the United States and Europe. In the year 2015, today, it's just a bit east of Saudi Arabia, and by the year 2030, it is between India and China, as these two massive economies have continued to grow at rates of 6 to 9% per annum and are bringing the whole world economy into Australia's backyard with a huge opportunity for us. You know, billions of people crossing an income threshold, billions of people who didn't need superannuation before do need it now, and banking services and holidays and a bunch of cultural services. And this shift that we're seeing in the Chinese economy is amazing. But there's challenge too in that they're investing in their own industry, and there are 10,000 economy in India who are now educated and who will work at 1/10 of the price, and our internet connection brings them a lot closer to me. The next megatrend we call forever young. Our age demographic is meant to be young, middle-aged, old, a fairly egg-shaped thing, but it's going coffee cup, wine glass, or we might be morbid and say coffin-shaped as we move into the future, and we have a much larger number of older persons comprising the population as we go out. So we're about 13% over 65, or 14% over 65 at the moment. That gets closer to 24% by midway through the century. We do not, as a country, have enough money put away for a comfortable retirement. If we look at the retirement savings gap that is calculated by Rice Warner actuaries, that's about $1 trillion for Australia now. That's a shortfall in people's retirement savings of what we've got put away and what we need to put away for a comfortable retirement. Healthcare expenditure is going up at unsustainable levels. One estimate suggests it's about 20% of all government taxes on healthcare today, rises to 40% by 2043. And that's an unsustainable growth in healthcare costs, partly driven by ageing population, as you spend most of your healthcare in the last few years of your life, but also heavily driven by chronic illness and lifestyle-related illness. We're around 50% overweight or obese, and that goes to 70% by the year 2025, driven heavily by diet and lifestyle factors. So all that is packed into the forever young story. Virtually here is a story about digital technology disruption, and this one is really capturing most of my attention at the talks I do these days. This is about the incredible shift that's happening around us as digital technology advances rapidly and changes the way we live our lives, the way we communicate, the way we access information, who we trust, and also the way the business is structured. What Uber is doing to taxis at the moment can happen right across a lot of different industries. Uberization is a valid noun now, and that means your company, someone has found a workaround via digital technology that replaces what you're doing. And the challenge of Uberization is to be in the driver's seat of that change and see how the disruption goes. Ray Kurzweil is Director of Engineering at Google, and he is sitting on a wealth of information and data about the digital technology revolution and challenges us quite heavily that the future beyond 2020 doesn't look like anything the world we're seeing today. And Google is a company that is doing that to us. Google keeps on with its Google Maps and automated vehicles, driverless cars. It keeps on putting stuff on the agenda for us. It just amazes us. And there's a lot more in the pipeline. It's because if we look at computing speed, data connectivity, the amount of people online, on web, using the web, those graphs are all exponential as opposed to linear. So the world beyond 2020 shifts substantially. Ray Kurzweil uses an analogy called the second half of the chessboard, which is starting to get used in disruptive technology literature a bit. And he uses the analogy of the person who invented chess wanted an award from the king. On the first half of the chessboard, the award wasn't too bad. So the award was to have 1 grain of rice on the first square of the chessboard, 2 on the second, 4, then 8, and build a geometric progression to the end. And the king sort of said, yeah, that's fine. It'll just be a couple of buckets of rice. I can easily do that. And he agreed to it. Now, for the first half of the chessboard, the king must hand over 13 hectares worth of rice. He can do that and go on being king. It's not yet been disruptive. As we get into the second half of the chessboard, though, that's where exponential growth changes things and makes a big disruptive impact. By square 50, the king has to plant Japan, and by square 64, the king has to plant the entire surface area of the world to rice for a period of 4 years to be able to fulfill his debt. Now, the story ends one of two ways. One way, the inventor of chess becomes a new king. The other way is a lot more accurate for scientists and geeks around the world, and one of my colleagues in Cairo, in that he was smart enough to work out the maths but did not understand politics and got his head cut off for being naughty. Very true. And anyone who watches House of Cards, I'm watching that, and I think all my science colleagues should watch that to understand how this stuff really works. But the digital megatrend is really about this incredible shift, and beyond 2020, if we believe Ray Kurzweil in this chess analogy, we see the world operate in very different ways. And if we challenge ourselves for a superannuation sector company, a finance company, a bank, can we Uberize that? Can we put in place a bunch of digital technologies and make use of crowdsourcing to change it? And I think the answer is often yes, we can. We can build that model that replaces the existing business. Let's go to the last one, because Great Expectations is a megatrend that is somewhat counter to the previous one. Great Expectations is about consumer expectation for experience, the all-important experience factor. And it's built on the notion of the experience economy. And the experience economy is becoming supercharged in a world of advanced manufacturing, integrated logistics and supply chains, and online everything with 24/7 services. The ability to create a product and get it to you is getting easier and easier and quicker and quicker. 3D printing can create a three-dimensional shape of any form. As the materials get more advanced, we're going to be able to build a lot more stuff more quickly. Even whole houses are being 3D printed. So another analogy here, if I might give, of what the experience economy is all about, coming from two authors writing in the Harvard Business Review. They talk about a kid's birthday rights. Let's go back in the past, and this kid is having a birthday, and his mum and dad make him a chocolate cake, and they're not very wealthy. They trade eggs, sugar, milk, cocoa across the farm fence, make a cake, and it's the centerpiece of the party. And all the kids in the neighbourhood love it, and this physical good is very important. Let's go a little bit forward into the future, a generation, and we have income growth and more time-poor parents who are working, and a bit of industry diversification. The parents in this time instead now go to a cake shop, and they can get a tractor cake, a digger cake, a soccer cake, a fire engine cake. For my little daughter, we had to do, Tinkerbell has been brutally rejected for Anna and Elsa off Frozen. We had to do a Frozen cake. But all of a sudden, it's not just the physical ingredients that matter to the child, it is the experiential good that sits around it, the way it's making them feel. And that starts to get more important. Let us now go forward further into the future with another generation change, more income growth, industry diversification, and even more time-poor parents. This time they click on the website for the party company, and the party company has a clown, a magician, a jumping castle, decorations. The cake is thrown in free of charge, and the physical ingredients of that cake barely matter. Everything is all about the experiential good. The next 2 decades sees Experience Economy 2.0 is written about, as digital technology, advanced manufacturing, and income growth in Asia combine to create a big focus on the experience package. It wasn't a cup of coffee you had this morning, the physical ingredients, it was the ambience, the aroma, the feel of the coffee shop. Was it fair trade? There was a bunch of higher level emotive goods that you're connecting to that. The energy company is not selling me electricity, they're selling me heat, light, warmth, and cooling. And that shift into the future is the all-important one. I don't think we do see travel agents disappear, and we don't see insurance brokers disappear. They're still here, but they're changing, and they're having to get focused on higher end creative questions and also really focus on the customer experience. So just to end up, we face an innovation crisis in Australia, in that through all these mega trends, how we get through it is via ideas. Our productivity has increased via innovation, and this graph from the Australian Bureau of Statistics is a concerning one. We're starting to see productivity decline, and for me this is a catch-all for these mega trends. The solution here is innovation, and we face an innovation imperative to capitalise on the mega trends I've just shown you.
Zimbabwe, where I was born, every afternoon during summer it would bucket down. When I was 6, I watched a small black girl recede through the back window of my dad's car as she walked alone in this torrential rain. Dad had been a bomber pilot in World War II, and he'd reflected, as I sat on his knee, that he'd rained bombs on little girls like me. My best friend at the time was a girl who lived in Boston, USA. She populated the pages of a treasured compendium that told the stories of her daily life. So on Christmas Day, she stood before a glittering snow-laden tree, and I sat in the dust of my African home and was transported. Because stories are evocative and curious, complex and ambivalent, and we are designed to respond to them. They charge us with emotion, and they test our resilience. The perfect family life of my Boston friend made me green with envy. And then I grew up and realized it was the power of story to frame perception. My dad's tragic reflections stirred empathy and later distress at what we impose on children through our ongoing negligence, war among it. And that little black girl and the life I imagined for her caused me shame. You see, our personal stories matter. They sculpt our life's experience. In business, they describe the culture and the purpose that directs it. These childhood recollections, each would become a square in a patchwork of events that would compel me to go online in 2008 and take action. It's impacted on thousands of people every year since. Those first few steps online were daunting. It's a predatory creature. It's voracious. It gobbles up your time and energy and money. And it's a world made murky by misconception because peddlers lurk at every corner, preaching their methods with the zealotry of the converted. First among them, that success online can be measured by how many people like, link to, or follow you. I was captaining my own exploration through this uncharted territory, so I was easy prey. But as a mandate for doing good business, I soon learned it was badly misplaced energy. Because real connection is just not so random. It's cause-related and intent-driven. The vehicle is story and the driver is clarity. Clarity unearths a single focused intention that fans desire because it exposes exactly why, for exactly whom, you want what you want. Think about the Olympic intention for its athletes: faster, higher, stronger, and what that spawns every 4 years. If clarity is an elusive creature, curiosity is its best friend. I love the online space, first because it unleashed an insatiable curiosity. I learned from a talk called The Brain and Love by Helen Fisher that certain cells in the brain activate a chemical called dopamine that is responsible for motivation and desire. It literally lights up the brain like a New Year's firework display. Addictive drugs release dopamine. Romantic love releases dopamine. So does everything you want. I found that such a revelation. What motivates you, what fans your desire, is determined by what you want, although you don't always know it at the time until you have an idea. So decades later, that tiny wet girl of my childhood shame was reawoken when my aunt came to visit from South Africa. She told us she bought blankets for orphan children that she found alone and cold on the side of the road, sometimes at night. This was a really confronting reality, and we were appalled. Coincidentally, my mother had just knitted this blanket made of squares. Out popped the idea. I could go online. I could ask the world's knitters to knit a square, send it to my aunt, and then she could make rather than buy blankets to warm these desperate children. The idea was clear, but was it a burning desire? Not yet. If I was to persuade the knitters to act, they needed to understand why. So I started to research. Completely staggering statistics filled me with despair. I learned that a child loses a parent every 15 seconds, and that there are 25 million children orphaned, abandoned, and abused because of HIV/AIDS and poverty and stigma, and most of them live in southern Africa. What was to change the idea to a focused intention and the despair to a driving desire? Well, it was a story I found online. It was told by Stephen Lewis, who had been the United Nations Special Envoy for HIV/AIDS to Africa, about a young girl who'd been recently orphaned. He said he'd witnessed many such stories before, but that few had left him in such disarray. And that as she told of the death of her mother just a few days before, this little girl wept copiously, uncontrollably. He said it was as if her weeping plumbed the depths of the sea. Her tears didn't just flow, they gushed, they ran down her sweater and soaked her skirt. And for a moment in time, it was as if this young girl was the pandemic incarnate. My brain lit up. Now my family and I had a burning desire. We wanted to make a difference in the lives of these children. We wanted to raise awareness of this unheralded human tragedy. We wanted to corral the online beast and build a massive global community that would work to warm and comfort these children. And we leapt out of bed every day to act on this desire. Now, you might be thinking, how does this relate to my business? But it does, because there's no difference wanting for a cause and wanting for a business purpose. Roy Spence, an adherent of the emerging conscious capitalism movement, and author of It's Not What You Sell, It's What You Stand For, explains that when business is at its best, it looks for friends and for love, because then it can play to its strength for the purpose of serving the greater good. Do we look for friends in business? Absolutely. We want to work with and for people who value what we do and love it so much they'll share it with others. Love, well, yes, in a metaphorical sense. If you serve people so well you eliminate their pain, they'll love you for it. They'll join your clan. A clan shares a common intention. They believe what you believe. They get why you believe what you believe. And that manifests trust, the mainstay of a community of loyal friends. So if we have clarity of intention and a burning desire, what sits at the intersection that communicates the common belief and builds trust? I believe it's story. When I started work decades ago, nobody told real story. Not unless you were the resident bore, or drunk, or both. But today, TED has blazed a trail and blogging has reawakened the storytellers, and we don't have to question it anymore with the thought, is this allowed? So if Stephen Lewis could change my life in an afternoon, could telling stories about the orphans and their carers and why we were doing this and the knitters and their work create the same magic? I bought the domain knittersquare.com and started to tell the stories. And as the knitters found our site, we served these good people well for the greater good. We made it easy for them to contribute. We fostered their love and their friendship by sharing the communal story. And this built trust. A massive global community exploded. A trickle of parcels arrived in my aunt's home in South Africa, and it turned into a deluge. And today, tens of thousands of people send hundreds of thousands of squares which drip off every surface in rainbow colours. And they've made tens of thousands of blankets to warm tens of thousands of children. Soon it wasn't just our stories that fanned the flames. Businesses and corporations and hundreds of schools joined in. We even heard from sailors on the mighty aircraft carrier, the USS Enterprise, about their knitting club on board for the orphans. That's a heartwarming juxtaposition. Warriors of the sea knitting for orphans half a world away. This simple program has been an inspiration to everyone who's been involved. It's taught us that the internet can be used to harness compassion and galvanize action. And that if you've got clarity of intention, the stories you tell will ignite passion and gather community. And with such community, what we can all do is yet to be imagined. It taught me to listen for story. And revealed that everyone's a great storyteller when it matters. And even simple short stories like the ones I'm about to share with you can literally change lives. So a financial planner came to ask me to help him with a blog. He told me a story about a woman who had lost her husband and she was bereft and broke, and she asked him for help. And he discovered she had a $53,000 benefit she had no knowledge of. As I listened, I felt relief for this unknown woman, followed by alarm. Did we have such insurances? I discovered my life was covered, but my husband's wasn't. Lucky for him, not so good for me. We reviewed our insurances within a week, and now he tells that story online to inspire similar action. A good friend is a curator of a pathology museum. She told a visiting group of primary school students a story about our intestinal immune system. She said it's like an army at rest until you eat your cruciferous vegetables like broccoli. And then it goes on alert, and she painted a picture of these courageous little cell soldiers hunting down and destroying and invading pathogens. And she showed them a slide of an actual bowel cancer tumor and said, you see, if you don't eat your cauliflower, your body might grow one for you and it won't be one you'll want. And I said, you must tell that story online. If people understand this, it could save lives. This blog post doesn't gather dust on a bookshelf like a book or disappear into cyberspace like a social media update. It's there for as long as we live in the world that powers the internet. A young woman gave birth without any warning to her baby 15 weeks preterm. She shared her story and saved our granddaughter's life. Our daughter was so troubled at 20 weeks pregnant by similar symptoms, she insisted on a medical test from a reluctant doctor, and it revealed that she was in imminent danger of giving birth. We were within a hair's breadth of never meeting this beautiful child. Our gratitude for this story told is lifelong. Now I tell this story online. Who knows when it might prompt a similar action and save another precious child. You've learned that digital technology is driving customer experience and that there might be a bigger role for superannuation to play than just retirement. How might your stories and those of your colleagues burst these ideas into life? You see, this is what it takes to lead online, the courage to step into the space, to harvest your ideas, to do the work of clarity, to filter to a single focused intention, and then to unearth your communal stories and take them online to serve that intention and find the people who most need and want to hear it, to foster the connections it creates and then work together for the greater good. How might this good work change lives for the better or even save them? Thank you.
Hello everybody. How have you been? Have you been busy? Pretty busy? I know I've been busy. What about you, Christian?
Oh, very busy. Always busy.
We're always busy, aren't we? I mean, it seems to us that these days we're very busy at being busy, and we try and squeeze so much into our lives that it seems, sadly, that time to daydream is being squeezed out. I mean, just think about it for a second. When you think about the times where we used to daydream a lot, when you're sitting on the train, or you might have a little bit of time between meetings, or my personal favourite, the time when you first wake up in the morning and it's just you and your thoughts. I mean, we're not really sitting there staring into space, daydreaming anymore. We try and find something else to do. We try and use every available bit of time. We're probably likely to pick up our phones and check something. And it's those damn red notification numbers. You know the ones I mean. It's the 50 new emails that appear overnight. Those things stop us from daydreaming. And you look at kids these days as well. They're great at daydreaming, but then we send them to school and we tell them to pay attention and concentrate. And sadly, it seems that daydreaming is now being seen as a bit of a waste of time. You're sitting there staring into space. It looks like you're doing nothing. You don't look very busy, so that can't be a good thing. And we seem to be daydreaming less and less. And the thing about daydreaming is that it's actually a habit. And you can get out of the habit of daydreaming. you can almost forget how to do it. But the good news is, there's some good news. Today we're here to talk about daydreaming. I want to talk about why we think daydreaming is actually a skill that's applicable to any industry, why it's a skill that's worth learning again, and importantly, give you a few ways to get our brains back into the habit of daydreaming. And the extra good news, I think we're the last talk of the day. This is the first of only 6 slides, and this is the most number of words that we'll put up on a slide. So you're in good hands.
So we think it's a common thing that's coming around now. Daydreaming is kind of disappearing recently, and we believe it's because of tech. This wasn't the case in history. Just going back a few years, probably about a decade or so, there was a female, a 25-year-old female researcher for Amnesty International, and she was on a train going from London to Manchester. And she's busily working away, just going through notes. But the train unfortunately broke down, and it broke down right at the worst possible spot, and nobody could get off. The train was there for hours. Now, if you're in that situation and you were sitting on that train, you'd probably just go straight to the paper. You'd read the magazine, you'd be texting, you'd be going crazy. But this person just sat there and stared out the window. And she looked out the window for hours, just daydreaming. Now, if you were her colleagues just looking at her, you'd be going, well, gee, she's off with the fairies, what's with her? But that person turned out to be J.K. Rowling. And what she did, the story goes, that night, is she went home and penned Harry Potter. Now, because of that daydream, she is now the world's first, I think, only literary billionaire. So what happened if that train didn't break down? We don't know. Now, there are other examples of this in history. You have Isaac Newton. He was going absolutely nuts, had to go outside, bit of a daydream under a tree, saw an apple and went, oh, hang on, there's something in that. And then you have Einstein, same deal. What he used to do was he'd go crazy with a chalkboard. And then just to let himself go, he'd go for a bike ride. And as he's riding, came up with the theory of relativity. So what we're saying is daydreaming isn't daydreaming as such, it's actually creative thinking. Now, we've known this. It's something that we've kind of just taught ourselves or come across ourselves. But there is some legitimate science behind this.
We found some science.
Yes. So we have routine tasks where you've got not much happening, and daydreaming where you've got lots happening. Routine tasks are like making coffee, checking your social status, all that sort of stuff. Now, how does this work? We've got to be completely honest, we're not neuroscientists.
There's some lobes and some neurons and things, I don't know.
This is legitimate science. We had to prove this, and we've actually spoken to a neuroscientist at the last TED Talk, and he said, yeah, no, it's all true.
It's all right, we haven't made it up. We got it from a journal.
In all seriousness, the brain is more active when it is in a daydreaming state.
And as Christian said, we weren't looking for the science to back this up and to add some credibility to our talk. But it is also something that we've inherently known because we're quite lucky that part of our job, we do get to daydream, and that's why we love our jobs. So we both work in advertising. We try very hard not to be advertising wankers. We work as creatives in advertising, and I am a copywriter and Christian's an art director, so I do words and Christian does pictures. And we work together to come up with ideas. And we realised that not everyone understands what's involved in our job. So before we move on, we just want to show you a little bit of our work so you get a bit of an idea of what we do.
Just a quick thing. This is something that I worked on a couple of years ago. Hopefully some of you may have seen it. It did go global. It was called The Best Job in the World. The problem that we had from our client with this brief, the problem they kind of threw to us was that the people were going to the Great Barrier Reef, they were going out to the reef, having a great time, but they weren't staying on the islands. So the problem was get people to stay on the islands. And so, great, awesome, let's get into that. We started working on it, but then another problem arose, which was the budget. We were to work on an international campaign, which means very expensive TV, very expensive press, but we couldn't buy that media overseas. And so what we could afford globally were classified ads, in actually job ads. So we then started to go down that thought process. We did present a lot of other ideas to the client. We didn't have a big time frame to do so, but we really like this and the client liked this. Now, picture yourself being a client as well. Being in that room for a state government, because it's Tourism Events Queensland, and being told you're not going to get a flashy TV commercial, you're going to get a classified ad. How would you feel? That's like a testament to Tourism Events Queensland and to Steve McRoberts. I actually like to say his name because he was the one who supported us and to have the trust in us. And it was amazing trust between the two of us to get this campaign going. Some of the results, just quickly. At the height of the campaign, we were getting in the UK more hits on our site than Google. So we were getting 5,000 hits a second, which was incredible. We created Australia's first server farm, which was just hilarious because they kept plugging in these server towers and they kept melting. Another thing, when they announced the winner up in Hamilton Island, the media circus up there was the equivalent of the Olympics, which is incredible. Trying to get like the region out to the world. Like you can't buy money like that, and buy media like that. And when the when Ben was announced, the applicant who'd got the job, they broke transmission on CNN, BBC, and Sky globally to announce the winner. So with the budget that we had, we made a lot for the client. And lastly, and this is when you really, really know you've had an incredibly successful campaign, my mum applied. And when I actually said to her, I said, look, Mum, I'm sorry, there's a massive conflict of interest here, you can't. She said, look, and she put her hand on my shoulder, she goes, look, you do ads, this is a job. I went, sorry, Mum, go for it.
Go for it, Mum. So that's one example. Another quick example that we've got to tell you about is an idea that we came up with for the University of Queensland recently. And the problem they came to us with was to try and promote the university to international science students. So our solution was to promote their most boring science experiment. So this is it. It's the pitch drop experiment. It's the world's longest running lab experiment, running for 86 years. And every 10 or so years, a blob of tar will drop, and it demonstrates viscosity. So the thing about it is no one has ever seen it drop, ever. It's cursed. In 88, when it was out actually at Expo 88, they were watching it, went and got a coffee, came back, it had dropped. And then 10 years later, okay, we'll get some cameras on this, we're not going to miss it this time. Power outage, didn't get it, nobody saw it again. And even the poor custodian who's been watching this for decades and decades, he passed away before he could see it drop. So, I mean, what do you do with something like that? We decided to build a website, put a live cam on it, so people could actually log in. They gave us their details for our database, and they logged in, and just for their chance at history to be logged in at the time when it dropped. And this is a still shot, but it's basically the same as watching the live site. The enigma around it was enough, and we didn't have a big budget. You know, we purely used PR and the channels that the university had themselves, but we managed to attract 400,000 visitors from around the world, and we could stay in touch with them. We had their emails. And I think we logged 35 years worth of watching in 6 months, and still no one has seen it. So these are just 2 examples of what we do, but primarily what we do is come up with ideas. And what is an idea? There's many definitions.
Oh, this is perfect timing.
Anyway, I'll just continue. What is an idea? There's many definitions of an idea, and we define it as you've got a problem, come up with a solution. And it sounds quite simple. There's a little bit more to it than that, and we've actually nutted this out exactly. We've made a diagram. It's the last diagram you'll see for this conference, but we've figured it out, and we've put it in a diagram, and we're ready to share that with you today.
Okay, you ready for this?
It's big.
That's it.
That is how you come up with ideas.
So, problem, solution. You have a problem, you come up with a solution. You do it every day. It's an easy solution, you just get there straight away. Is it going to work? Probably. Is it the best solution? Probably not. Like those examples we were telling you before, we would go off on different directions. They're not they were ideal solutions at the time, but they're not standard solutions. So what we do is we start to go everywhere first. And what the process is to do this is you need to train your brain. You need to start to get to a point where you can start thinking everywhere and get to a solution that will be fitting and make a difference to the client. There is an industry course that we did that helps you do this. It actually teaches you to come up with 100 ideas in a week for a problem. So it's like a pressure cooker situation. But what came out of it was something quite unique. When I did the course, I was really, really bad at it. I was actually probably the lowest. I was like the worst in the class. And so I tried to come up with 100 ideas a day. And after 700 ideas in a week, you'd think one of them was good. No. They were really bad. But what started to happen, and this is something they didn't teach you, what started to happen was that the amount of ideas were diminishing, but the ones that I were coming up with were so much better. So by the end of the course, I was probably doing 20 ideas, 30 ideas a day, but those 20 or 30 ideas were so much better than the 700 I came up with weeks earlier. And what it also did teach us was that your brain is starting to teach itself as well to throw away bad ideas. So it then made us start to trust. And it works really, really well in our industry because it is a pressure situation at an agency where you've got, say, media's come in, we've just bought this huge spot, you have to fill it with something, you've got 2 days, it has to be good or else the client's going to lose all this money. And what you need to do is you need to be able to go and daydream. You need to go and relax and trust that your brain will come up with a solution.
So let me explain this squiggly bit in the middle a little bit more. There is a bit of a process to it. And basically there's 2 steps. And the first step is about filling your brain, trying to cram as much information as you can into it. So you go and do the research, you go and experience the problem, talk to people about it, talk to different people, and just throw as much information into your head as you possibly can. And you can't skip this step, it's very important, and that's the hard work bit. But once you've done that, then you can do the fun bit, which is the daydreaming bit. And for that, you really just have to let your brain relax. You can't force it. You have to do it in an unstructured way. And our brains are quite good at sorting things out. So once you put all of that information in, let your brain sort it out. Usually the most interesting, powerful, aspects will rise to the surface. And your brain's quite good at making connections between things and just figuring it out. But like I said, you can't force that. You can't just sit there and make it happen. You do have to be a bit loose about it and let the ideas flow. So we can't do this sitting at our desk in the office. We have to get out of the office to do it. And I guess we usually go to a cafe or probably mostly go to a pub. But that's why I love my job. A glass of beer or a little cheeky rosé is actually a good thing to loosen you up and get the ideas flowing and let you be unstructured and just let your brain sort things out. But you can't have more than 2 drinks. That's just a tip. Then you're just useless.
So the way that we kind of work together is, and this is kind of explaining the graph as well, after we've filled our brains, we go and sit at a pub or at a cafe, and we usually sit down for about 5 minutes and don't say anything. It's really bizarre. And it's something that we just started to see happening. We just sat there, and what was happening was bad ideas were being thrown away. And so we kind of do about 5 minutes of just getting through all the crap first, and then it might be me that starts the process where we go, do you know what we could do? We could probably do this. And as I'm starting to think of a thought, which is one of those lines there, as you start to have a thought, Marianne will go, oh, you know what? That's great because you can go that way, and it just takes off onto another direction, which I wasn't going there, but that's so much better. So I'll just jump on and go, yeah, that's where I was going. And then we start to spiral all over the place. Now, as this is happening, you're jotting it down. Just quick notes, just bang, 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 bang. But you don't review because that stops the whole thought process. Just keep it going down. It will eventually peter off, and you'll eventually get to a point where you start to review. But let the process go first. And it's kind of 2 brains daydreaming together at this stage. And you're kind of verbalising the daydream. And then once it starts to kind of, coming back to reality, there might be a beep on your phone or some sort of distraction and you're kind of back into the real world. You review and then start the process again. There might be something that you circled, you go, oh, you know what, there is something in that, and you go off again. Once you've done that process, you give it the overnight test. I know everybody's heard this, but it is true. You have to give it the overnight test. And then in the morning, if it's still good, most of the time it's not, but if it's still good, great, keep going with it. Usually what happens is you've Googled it in the middle of the night going, this is really great, and then somebody else has come over and oh shit! So you have to start the process again.
Cool. So I guess today we want to share our thoughts on coming up with ideas, but you can call it so many different things, whether it's problem solving, daydreaming, brainstorming, it's all the same thing to us. But we wanted to share it with you guys. We don't think it's applicable just to people that have the word creative in their job title. I think it's applicable to people in any industry, in any career, even superannuation, particularly superannuation, our future. And it's essentially problem solving, which I think is useful to everyone. And you see it happen a fair bit in science, as well as listening to Stefan's talk. And when it's applied in science and technology, that's when really amazing things happen as well. So we invite you to apply some of your daydreaming to your career, or perhaps, your general life, whether you're trying to figure out a renovation or how to find the love of your life. Apply some daydreaming and you might find a more innovative solution. So do we have time for one last story?
Just one quick story.
Yeah.
It's flashing. It's to say, you're over time.
Or should we skip?
Oh, no, just one quick story.
Okay, quick story.
It's the last session anyway. I was a daydreamer when I was a kid, and the actual quote from my mum was that the lights were on, but no one was home. And so she went and saw the teacher and said, what's happening in class? Is he kind of all there? And the teacher goes, no, he's a bit off with the fairies. Occasionally he comes back, but he's usually just mind sort of wandering. Mum actually said to the teacher, just walk up behind him and give him a smack on the back of the head. That'll bring him instantly back in the room. It did work, but not good, seriously. But what I'm trying to say is, because of the way things are with tech and with everything happening with our kids at the moment, they need to daydream, because daydreaming is really creative thinking. So if you see your son, daughter, niece, nephew that's kind of starting to zone out, let them go through with it. Don't stop them, because they are creative thinking. They will be back on the iPad within 5 minutes anyway. But just let them go.
So today we hope that we've inspired you to get back into the habit of daydreaming. And let's face it, we're not as busy as we all say we are. And you can imagine if J.K. Rowling's train hadn't broken down, we hope that she would have made time to daydream anyway. And when you make time, please make sure that it's uninterrupted time. So we've got our final slide for today. We encourage you to put your phones down and ignore those red numbers for a little while. This is Christian's phone, and he's excellent at ignoring the red numbers.
I missed a call.
Yeah. And you've filled your head with so much information over the past few days. What better time to let it simmer and learn to daydream again? Thank you.